I said all along that Georgia was the best team in the country, but after last night, it's Michigan. If you want to be the national champion, beat Alabama. Quit losing to them. The best team in the country is the national champion. So we're going to digest this from Paul Finebaum. A couple of you know, curious takes there. I will be dissecting one of them very specifically. But Matt, I'm going to throw it to you. Your comments of what Paul was not the person. Paul was the only person on set that agreed with this. Booker McFarland took a pass.
I think he's got some points. I think Michigan could run on just about everyone. Love their backs, their offensive line, their run scheme. Very, very good, very impressive. Their defense was really, really good. They beat Ohio State when they had to. They beat Alabama when they had to. And they beat a Washington team that they knew they could overpower. And that's what they did. So they definitely earned it and they deserved it. Could Georgia beat Michigan? Absolutely. If they played 10 times, I could see Georgia beating them 6. But Michigan won the games that they needed to. The team's in front of them, and they got the job done. And I was really impressed by not complete offense that they brought to the table, but that run game, Ryan, was really impressive. And at the end of the day, Georgia had an opportunity. We've talked about it. And they kind of played their worst on the biggest stage, and it cost them. So I think Michigan earned it.
Yeah, I mean, they won the games that mattered, and they happened to win all their games, but they won the ones that really mattered, even if the Bama one was in overtime, right? And like what you said, Georgia didn't play its best, arguably its worst, close to its worst at the biggest stage. So we'll never know because we'll never get to see the hypothetical. I think if the two teams matched up, I think Georgia would beat Michigan in a game head-to-head. I definitely think Georgia would beat Washington. After watching that, overpower is a great way to put it. I mean, that's exactly what Michigan did to them. Literally, they just beat the crap out of them. I mean, you got Michael Penix Jr. out there limping around, falling over and stuff. But it must be hard to be on national TV and have to do all these takes every week. I mean, people got to stop changing their minds, man. Stop. Just stick to something or admit when you want to, and I know Paul. I like Paul, but I'm sick of people changing their minds so much with these takes.
Well, he's allowed to change his mind after watching a game, but I will say this. I would love to know that I was unaware that the prerequisite for winning a national championship was beating Alabama, because Georgia won the national championship last year and didn't beat Alabama. Number 2, the only time there's a prerequisite to win the national championship and beating Alabama is when you play Alabama in the national championship. I don't know if y'all take a gander to that one. The last time they played in the national championship game, Georgia did beat Alabama. So all hot takes aside, no, you don't have to beat Alabama. You have to beat Alabama if they're in a national championship game against you, if they're in a terminal game. It turned out the SEC championship was a terminal game. It should not have been. But the notion that Georgia, I don't know why Georgia has to beat Alabama and the rest of the country doesn't. I mean, UW didn't play them. Why were they playing for the national championship if they didn't play Alabama? Everything can't revolve around Alabama. I mean, this has gotten – Alabama's a great – we've talked about Bama plenty. We talk about Georgia obviously a lot more. This has gotten a little bit silly that, you got to go through Alabama. No, you don't. Georgia went 15-0 last year, smoked everybody except Mizzou and Ohio State. I don't think there was much question, Matt, about who the national champion was last year.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost feels like you have to go through Georgia now, but even though Michigan didn't have a chance to play right. Georgia.
And what happened the last time those two played? Was that competitive?
No, it wasn't. At the end of the day, Alabama's gone 3 years now without a national championship. So
is that right? You say 3 years. What happened in 2 of those years? I was on
the Dogs. The Dogs took it home, Ryan. So I agree that we have to take Alabama off this pedestal that we've put them on for the past decade plus, right? They're the ones who have to start winning every single game in front of them now. And, they're going to have the Dogs coming to town early next season, and they're going to have to prove it. At the end of the day, you have to execute on the field on that day. We can say this team's better than that team. Georgia's better than Washington, Michigan, Texas, Alabama, whoever. When the game is being played, you've got to execute at a high level if you want to win that game. Georgia executed at a very high level all season long, except for that first Saturday in December. And that's probably what we're going to remember most about this season.
Hey, Ryan, the part he's exactly correct about. See, what Paul excels at is finding a particular weakness to anybody, Alabama, Georgia, whoever, and he points his finger right on it for like, so y'all better get ready for this out there. That's all that's going to be said is that, but he's right. Quit losing to Alabama. I agree. I mean, Texas A&M's had more success against Alabama than Georgia has, but Texas A&M is not even. Auburn has. I mean, Georgia has smoked Auburn. Auburn, Georgia has not been competitive, generally speaking. I mean, this past year notwithstanding. Alabama gets fits from them, Ryan, but he's right. Quit losing to them. There's nothing to talk about. There's always something to talk about, but I think that's his. I think that point is correct. The other stuff is just hot take world.
Yeah, I mean Georgia didn't beat who was in front of them, and it wouldn't have mattered if it was LSU or Alabama in that SEC championship. If Georgia lost, obviously we saw what was going to happen. The committee wasn't going to put them in that game. So, it has less to do with Alabama than I guess what Paul was talking about. But you got to beat them at some point, man. Outside of that one national championship, what 1-5, 1-4? I mean, it's not great. It's the one thing really that Georgia under Kirby has just not been able to figure out outside of that one game. And
that's on Kirby, by the way.
It is on Kirby. It is on Kirby. And I think a lot of the blame for however you want to do it falls on Kirby for this at the end of the day. And that's how it goes with the head coach anyway. But like I said, it wouldn't have mattered. I mean, if Georgia lost that day, I think we just saw what the committee was going to do. It didn't matter that it was Alabama. Did it, or did it because Alabama got in and that was what pushed them out? I think Florida State would have just got in.
I think the Florida State people have got a point on that front, which is that the loss that Georgia took that day invited two teams. Florida State wasn't getting in, so that wasn't happening. I think the coaches got it more right than the media, ranking Georgia at 3. I don't think you could legitimately put them at 2 because they didn't play in the national championship game. But, it's also got to be, and I'll repeat this many times, in 2007, was Tennessee Georgia better than Georgia? No, they beat them, but they weren't the better team by the end of the year. That's for sure. Was Texas better than Alabama by the end of the year? I don't think they were, but whatever. Better. Was Oklahoma better than Texas? Oklahoma wasn't better than Texas the day they beat them. And y'all, I wouldn't shut up about that. I don't know if y'all remember that car ride to the stadium and back, but I was like, there's no excuse for them losing this game, but they did. And you're going to have that, Matt, in football from here on out with so many competitive games. But I think Paul's wrong. The best team is the national champion. I think you can make the case for that. I don't think that they're necessarily the best team. They're just the national champion, which is what you would want to be. If you're picking between the two, you'd rather be the national champion than the best team.
Yeah, and I know a lot of people say we talk about Alabama too much, but
what else are we going to talk about? You want to talk about Georgia Tech?
That's my point. Auburn doesn't matter. Florida doesn't matter. Tennessee doesn't matter. Georgia doesn't have a problem drilling those guys into the ground. They've got a problem beating Alabama consistently. So we got to talk about why is it? What can be changed? How does
they have really good players and really good coaches? Most teams, the teams that Georgia struggled, Missouri is kind of strange. Now, Missouri was a really good team this year, Ryan. But the teams that Georgia struggled with during this time were Clemson, game 1. I'll be honest, I don't know how that game was as close as it was, but it was. And
they struggled offensively.
They were bad offensively, but Clemson's really good on defense. But after that, they played Alabama. Like, was there a close game between Clemson and Bama in 21? No,
there wasn't a single close game.
So, you had that, and they blew Michigan out. Then they beat Alabama by 15. A year later, they beat Oregon by 48 or whatever it was. And then, they had a hard time with Mizzou on the road. Ryan and I were there for that one. Sometimes it's hard to explain these things. But then, the teams they struggle with are really good teams, Ohio State and Alabama. After that, the games are not competitive, man, right?
No, it's when you look at the resume top to bottom compared to the other top teams, and even in Michigan, I mean, Michigan's took care of business early on this year, but Michigan has its struggles against.
Uh-oh. He's freezing.
Alabama has.
Go ahead.
I'm freezing. I see my Wi-Fi bars jumping around.
Go ahead. You're hanging in there. No, he's not.
Better way to put it. I could think
of the SEC championship on Saturday. Here comes the fumble from Dylan Bell. Stand by. Look, sorry, Ryan. Go ahead and complete your thought, or try to.
I was just saying, I mean, you can look at examples across all sports. The best team doesn't always win.
Right.
You can see that in the NBA. You can see that in the NFL. I'm sure you could see that in baseball and hockey. It's just not the way things play out all the time. So I can sit here and say, I do think Georgia was the best team in college football this year. I don't care that Michigan won the national championship. I think Georgia's better than them, but they didn't win because they lost on the wrong day to probably the wrong team. So I think there is an element of truth to what Paul was saying there. I do think the Alabama part mattered a little bit, especially just the way that the scenario played out with the head-to-head with Texas and everything. But you got to win. At the end of the day, you have to win. You have to win the games, so you can leave no question out there.
Well, I'll say this though, as we wrap this one up, it is a little crazy to expect undefeated from here on out. Like everybody's going to lose. There's going to be one team in the SEC that has the ability to be undefeated, and it's probably not going to happen. One team in the Big Ten is probably not going to happen. I mean, the notion that we're going to see a 13-0, you could see a 13-0, it's possible, but man, not the way these schedules are anymore. I mean, they are brutal. Georgia with Texas, Alabama, and Georgia, all top 5 teams coming out of 23. They're playing each other. 24, excuse me. Georgia's playing both those guys, and then Alabama's got their own, fight along the way. So it's just not going to be simple to do this. All right, thanks for watching. That's what we got on Paul.